Hey, what's up everybody? I know that a lot of us are looking for a fun and really powerful build to use right now, and I have spent the last 2 weeks really working on creating and innovating a build that is just that, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you. It is a build that I call the Titan build. This is unlike any other build out there because of the specific mix of items that this build uses, and it is a top tier build. Definitely one of the best builds in the game. The Titan build is a melee soul build, and it's a perfect mix between speed, damage, and tankiness. This build is best used for when you want to fully run through dungeons and fight most of the mobs in them. In fact, this build outperforms the Fighter's Bindings build if that's what you plan on doing. If you plan on defeating most mobs in the dungeon, not just speed running through, not attacking anything, then this is your build. This is the second build from my Minecraft Dungeons Best Build series, so let's get into it. Starting off with a showcase of the build. This build at first has a little bit of a charge up. It doesn't take much time to charge up at all, but basically that charge up is killing some mobs in order to get some souls, and therefore activating our soul speed enchantment that can only be put on soul armor. This makes it so that whenever you gather a soul, you gain a 1% stacking movement speed boost for 4 seconds. As you can see though, this effect stacks infinitely. You can just get faster and faster the more and more souls you get, and since it lasts for 4 seconds, it's pretty easy to keep this up, and when you do get those stacks up, look at that speed. This can easily outrun the Boots of Swiftness, Ghost Cloak, and Deathcap Mushroom combo. Now there is one thing that can happen, it can run out, but it's okay, we'll get that back up in a moment. Now I do want to focus on something else here. We have our Whirlwind Axe. This axe is crazy. The AoE on it and just base damage and attack speed is insane, especially when we combo it with the Deathcap Mushroom. As you can see, we have no problem here clearing packs of mobs all at once. There is no problem of not having enough AoE. You have more than enough here, and with that we also have, of course, no problems getting our souls up. And that is what we like to see. Our armor is the dark armor. Preferably here we want to have the Titan Shroud, but basically this gives us 35% damage reduction and 100% soul gathering, and also plus 20% melee damage if you have the Titan Shroud. But it is quite difficult to get a Titan Shroud with good enchantments, so that's why you don't really have to worry about that. But the base damage reduction that is on this armor is extremely significant, and it's really all that you need for the armor because we already have enchantments and an artifact that also boosts our survivability. And when combined, we have all of the survivability that we would ever need. So keep in mind, we're always keeping up the Deathcap Mushroom effect because this boosts our movement speed, but also and mainly this increases our attack speed, which in turn increases the amount of damage that we do, and also our survivability because our Radiance enchantment will proc more and we'll be able to kill more mobs. You'll also notice that we have the Soul Healer artifact, and this artifact is used to gain more souls, but also it's an incredibly useful survivability tool. You just keep on popping it. As soon as you really get the souls going, you can just basically infinitely pop it because you really won't have problems getting souls when you are fighting a big pack of mobs. But this heals you so much, and because we do have a good amount of damage reduction, we don't take that much damage as is, but even when we do, we have that heal to keep us up. There's also one more item that we use in this build. It is the Gong of Weakening, and we only use it during boss fights because it increases the amount of damage that we can do to a target by about 2 or 3 times as much. So you want to make sure that you're swapping this in for any of your other artifacts during boss fights or maybe even mini boss fights. Overall, the speed that this build can reach is absolutely crazy, and at the same time, while having this speed, we have great damage and great survivability. Okay, so now to get into a detailed breakdown of the build, where I am going to tell you all of the items that you need, tell you where to get them, tell you what their use is, and what enchantments you need on some of them. For our weapon slot, we have the Whirlwind Axe, and I do want to say that the Cursed Axe is also a pretty good option. It is a double axe, so it has a swirl attack that hits all mobs around it on every single hit, and the Whirled Axe's special trait is the Shockwave enchantment, which sends out a shockwave in a frontal cone in front of you, damaging mobs on every single combo hit. And for us, with the Whirlwind Axe, every combo hit is every second hit. There are some other weapons that you could use instead, like the Cursed Axe or the Fighter's Bindings, or really any good weapon. However, other weapons will be less effective and will be harder to survive with. The reason why we are not using a soul weapon in this build is because the Whirlwind Axe performs much better in clearing packs of mobs. You do gain way more souls with soul weapons because of the +2 soul gathering on them, and so you do gain way more soul speed stacks, increasing your movement speed by a lot more, but the rate at which you kill mobs is very slow, and if you're fighting big packs of mobs, your lack of AoE damage can easily get you killed. The Moon Daggers, for example, are extremely good for boss fights, but for killing mobs, they're just not nearly as good as the Whirlwind Axe. So basically, with soul weapons, you have a trade-off of speed for damage, so you will have a much faster movement speed. It's crazy, but you just lack good damage. I've actually tested multiple soul weapons with this build, like the Soul Fists and the Jailer's Scythe, and the Whirlwind Axe being better is the conclusion that I came out with. If you want to get the Whirlwind Axe, the best place to get it would be the Saki Cave secret level, and keep in mind that it only drops on Apocalypse difficulty. And it's also worth noting that the Cursed Axe and Fighter's Bindings drop from here as well. There are a lot of videos talking about how to unlock Saki Cave, so you can easily find that out. In my Fighter's Bindings build guide, I do have a section on the timeline that says how to unlock Saki Cave, so if you do still need to unlock Saki Cave, you can just look at the timeline and skip to that part of the video. Getting into the enchantments for our weapon. The first enchantment that we're gonna want is Radiance. This is going to give us a 20% chance on attack to heal ourselves for a pretty decent amount. The reason why this is so important is it gives us a constant form of sustain. With the Soul Healer, it's more of a bursty heal, so we already have that. We need something that can constantly sustain us and isn't based on any certain thing that has to activate it. So I mean, for example, you really need this one fighting a mini boss, because with the Soul Healer, you may not have enough souls to charge it, and you'll be left with the Radiance enchantment as your only heal. If you would use something such as Leeching, it could be effective against mobs, but when it comes down to this mini boss fight, you are not going to be able to heal yourself, and well, that is bad news. The Radiance enchantment is a must need for our survivability toolkit, so you have got to get this enchantment. The second enchantment that you pretty much need, because the damage increase that it brings is so significant that without it you are going to lack damage, it is Critical Hit. This gives you a 20% chance to triple the damage of your base damage, and if you use the Whirlwind Axe with and then without this, you are going to notice a major difference, because this is the difference between one-shotting a mob and, well, 3-hitting a mob. The Whirlwind Axe already has a very significant base damage, so when you put this critical hit on it, it multiplies the damage much more than it would with other weapons. I mean, technically you can still deal good damage and survive without this enchantment, but the Whirlwind Axe just won't be nearly as effective without it. With the third enchantment, we do have some slight flexibility, but I would say that it is just about as powerful as the Critical Hit enchantment is, Swirling. This makes it so that on every combo hit, so every second hit, we perform an attack all around us that hits all enemies around us for a very significant amount of damage. This just boosts our AoE by a lot. Since our combo hit is every other attack and we are attacking pretty quickly, this is going to be activating a lot and very consistently. If you get the best in slot enchantments on one of the other great weapons, so the Cursed Axe or the Fighter's Bindings, then you could go ahead and use them instead, but from my experience, the Whirlwind Axe performed the best. If you're unable to get the best in slot enchantments and you just want to pick between the other choices that you got, I did make a list where I ranked all of the melee weapon enchantments in Minecraft Dungeons, so if you just go from the best to worst on that list and see where where your enchantments fit in, then you should just pick whatever the best enchantment you can get is. And of course, you do have to factor in the fact that we are using a whirlwind axe. So when you look at these enchantments, and for example, we have the shockwave enchantment, that could be pretty good on this weapon because we combo every other hit, so we are activating that enchantment a lot, as opposed to if we were to put that on a claymore, for example, which does not combo nearly as much. So you do have to factor that in, but overall that list should help you out. Now, looking at our armor slot, we have the dark armor, or preferably the Titan Shroud if you can get lucky enough to get it with the proper enchantments. The dark armor is the perfect choice for this build. It gives us a 100% soul gathering buff, and it gives us 35% damage reduction. The unique version, the Titan Shroud, also gives us a 20% increase to our melee damage, making this a pretty desirable piece of unique armor. However, I would advise just to go for the dark armor instead of the Titan Shroud, because it will take you an incredible amount of time to get the Titan Shroud with the proper enchantments on it. I've been probably grinding for it for a week on and off here and there, and I wasn't even able to get the Titan Shroud, let alone getting the best in slot enchantments on it. And if you have to pick between a piece of dark armor with the best in slot enchantments and a piece of Titan Shroud with mediocre enchantments, you always want to pick the dark armor. If you want to get the dark armor or Titan Shroud, the best place to get it would be at Fiery Forge, and keep in mind that it only drops on Apocalypse difficulty. So looking at our enchantments, of course we have Soul Speed, which gives us that significant speed buff that I talked about, and this is a must-have. Literally, throw away every single piece of dark armor or Titan Shroud that does not have Soul Speed on it, because if you don't have the Soul Speed enchantment on your armor, you are going to be so much slower, and you are going to be missing the main component to this build. The main purpose of this build is to mix together the biggest perk of having soul armor and at the same time having the best weapons and artifacts that you can. The next enchantment that we want is the cooldown enchantment. This gives us a 27% reduced cooldown on all of our artifacts, and the reason why this is so important is because when we are using 2 Deathcap mushrooms, we still cannot keep up the Deathcap mushroom artifact effect permanently. There is going to be some downtime, and that's going to, first of all, just hinder the damage, but also the fluency of this build. It makes it feel very clunky when you are unable to activate that Deathcap mushroom. So even though we still have to use 2 Deathcap mushrooms with this enchantment, this ensures that we constantly have the effect up. It makes it very easy to maintain, and it just makes the build feel way more fluent than if you do not have this enchantment. Cowardice. This is going to give you a 40% increase to your melee and ranged damage when you are at full HP, and we are going to be at full HP a pretty decent amount of the time, especially because the Whirlwind Axe has a pretty good radius, so it is difficult for mobs to hit you when you are hitting them. And that damage buff is just too much to pass up on. I would say that all 3 of these enchantments are a must. I mean, especially the Soul Speed enchantment, but I think all 3 of these enchantments are really important. If you were to have to choose between Cowardice and Cooldown, for example, I'd say that Cooldown may be on your priority list because it makes the build feel fluent, and although you will miss out on some damage, the fluency really starts mattering when you use this build over a long period of time. You're gonna start noticing when your Deathcap mushroom runs out a lot if you don't, so I'd recommend going for cooldown. But that 40% damage increase from Cowardice is also incredibly important, and that's why I would really recommend just farming for the piece of gear with all of these enchantments. I've actually gotten 2 pieces of dark armor with all 3 of these enchantments on it, so I don't think that it would be too difficult. Looking at our ranged weapon slot, there is a lot that I want to talk about. Really, for this slot, any decent bow will work. We use our melee weapon for most of the time with this build. The reason why we don't use our bow too much is because we just don't get enough arrows in Minecraft dungeons to be able to use it throughout a whole level. And in my situation, I have the harp crossbow with the chain reaction, multi-shot, and fuse shot enchantments, and this outperforms any other weapon in the game. However, the reason why I don't create a full build around this bow is because I just don't have enough arrows to sustain myself throughout a whole dungeon run. I just always end up running out of arrows. I've tried to make a build around it, but I couldn't. So I only use my bow whenever I'm fighting a boss, mini boss, or I get webbed by a spider, or I'm just not taking any damage and I can afford to stand still for a moment and just deal some damage. Maybe when enemies are coming in waves and they're getting spawned. If you want to go all out and get an extremely good bow, go ahead, but it's just not the main component to the build. We don't use it much, and yes, it is extremely powerful, but the amount of time that it's going to take you to get this is just so crazy. It's so luck based. I got very, very, very lucky, and if you try to go for this, it can take you weeks. It can take you weeks. Possibly you'll just never ever get it, because it is really rare to get a unique item and then on top of that get the 3 enchantments on it that you want. So I would just recommend going with a decent bow. I mean, I've made videos ranking all of the bow enchantments and all of the bows, and those videos are slightly outdated and my views on some things have changed, but those are pretty accurate in the general look of things. So if you do want to find a good bow, you can watch those videos and that can help you out, but I just wouldn't suggest going crazy over the bow slot, because it's just, we barely use it and the whirlwind axe is really good enough. Now moving into our artifact slot. The first artifact that I want to talk about is the soul healer. As I've mentioned before, this gives us soul gathering, being +2 soul gathering, and it also adds to our survivability toolkit because it heals us based on how many souls we have, and when we have a decent amount of souls, this heals you for a lot. This is really useful in situations where you are fighting some stronger mobs, so enchanted mobs that maybe have some pretty strong effects on them, like thorns or double damage. And also it's useful when you are fighting a huge group of archers, for example, because they output a lot of damage and this is just gonna sustain you. You can activate this a few times in a row when your bar is full, and this can just keep on renewing your health bar. It is very, very useful. And the soul healer drops on every difficulty at Fiery Forge. Then we have the Deathcap Mushroom, which increases our movement speed and attack speed, and because we have an increased attack speed, we get to proc our Radiance enchantment more, and we just get to attack more, dealing more damage. This is the best artifact in the game. It is extremely useful for melee weapons, and we have 2 here because with 1 you can't keep up the effect constantly, and even though we do have a cooldown enchantment on our gear, we still need to use 2 Deathcap Mushrooms, and without that cooldown enchantment we would not be able to keep up the Deathcap Mushroom effect even with 2 mushrooms. So having 2 mushrooms is very important. As I said before with the armor, you have to keep the fluency of the build, otherwise it'll just start feeling clunky after a while of using it, so you want to make sure that everything works 24/7. I got my Deathcap Mushrooms at the secret Cal level, but you can also get them at the high block halls and also Creeper Woods. Really, it doesn't matter, you can go anywhere and they drop on every difficulty. And finally, there's one more artifact. It is an artifact that we're only going to use during boss fights or sometimes mini boss fights. It is the Gong of Weakening. It weakens your enemies and it just makes you kill them 2 to 3 times as fast. It is a significant damage boost in the short period of time that it is active, but really that short period of time is all that we need. You should quickly just swap this in instead of any of the other artifacts during a boss fight and activate it, kill the boss, and then you can go back to your normal artifacts. You can also use this on mini bosses, do the same thing, switch in the Gong of Weakening for anything, and then just switch it back out. This drops at the Secret Cal level and Desert Temple, only on Apocalypse difficulty. It is a significant damage boost on bosses, so I do really recommend getting it and swapping it in every single time you engage with a boss. But anyways, everybody, that'll do it for the Titan build. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Hopefully this helped you out and it brings you a new, fresh, amazing build to use. I really recommend that you try this one out. I think it is incredible. But other than that, check out my previous build in this Minecraft Dungeons Best Builds series where I showcased the Fighter's Bindings build and did a full guide on it. And other than that, thank you so much for watching this video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.